Hello and welcome to another edition of Happenings.
Really is all about and bringing the community to the school.
In the schools, developing relationships with students, with parents. No, we just taped a show on that.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Happenings in the Dearborn Public Schools. I'm David Mustonen, Director of Communications. So here it is, winter in Michigan, our lovely, famous, wonderful time of year. We all enjoy it. So many great winter activities to take part in. And one of Dr. Maleyko's favorite winter activities would be snow days.
Snow days, yes. And this year, David, so far, we're good. My
Not a
holiday
one. Not
wishes
a
came
single
true.
one.
Not even close to one so far. I think
You could be really jinxing us.
I was going to say
I'm
jinx.
good with it. I'm good. No, I'm good. I don't believe in that stuff. Unless I'm playing hockey.
Okay, all right. Well, that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today here is snow days and how we go about calling those snow days when it comes time to do that. A couple of folks who are instrumental and key in that overall process joining us today, Dr. Don Ball, who is our safety and security and operations expert, and Maysam Alie-Bazzi, who is our executive director of staff and student services. So thank you both for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
So we just want to talk about the process, and we've taped a similar show 4 years ago now.
Yeah,
I think it was
ago,
almost 4 years ago on what it takes. But it's a very complicated process, and I think people think it's quick and easy and simple, but there's a lot that goes into it. Our team has come up with a crisis emergency plan for school closures across the board, and we have different individuals that are key. I would tell you, look, I'm a shared leadership guy. That's how we operate this district for the most part. But when it comes to emergencies, you basically have to be directional. That's the time where you really come up and make quick decisions. And you still get input, but you get input from less, and you have to make those decisions on a more timely basis. Sure. And so that's where Dr. Ball, one of my favorite things is when he calls me early in the morning and gives me a heads up. Usually it's 4:35 a.m.
Yes.
Okay, we got an issue in the building. And school closures are not, people that think snow days, but it's not. It can be cold, it can be electrical outages, it could be water, it could be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. And Don, I know your role, between you, me, and actually David, and then transportation, Mark Andrews, we're kind of the four, on a potential closure, let's just say it, we're probably the four most important guys in the, people in the district that make that decision.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And our day starts at anywhere between 4:30 and 5. When we have that first phone call, we usually have people out working in the overnight, doing the salting, doing the plowing. So we get a first-hand report from them on basically how bad the roads are. And then Glenn and I talk along with David and come up with a decision if we're going to stay open or if we're going to close. If you look at it in a domino effect, once we make that decision, we've got to notify transportation so that we don't start our buses up and start getting people on the road. So it's really time sensitive between that 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. time frame.
Between that time. Yeah. And so one of the things too that we have is we also have protocols on our apps that we can communicate with each other and get that information out. But one of the things we will do, and we've done this a few times, is that if we know conditions are going to be blizzard-like the next day, we try to make the call sooner,
earlier in the evening.
And that's happened. Yep. But then there's been other times where we're not sure because look at weather. It's not 100% predictable, and we know there's times where it's said it's going to be one thing and then it turns out to be something else. So we want to keep kids in school. So with the weather, sometimes we plan to wait till the next morning because we want to see the conditions because we don't want to close school and then look, we have clear weather.
Yes.
I think too what happens many times too, a weather system will move in, and Don, I know that's part of what you do too. I know you're tracking 3 or 4 different weather stations, including some friends of yours in the Coast Guard, calling on some old friends that you have there and connections that you have there to monitor the weather. But many times these weather patterns move in, and maybe north of 8 Mile they're getting 6, 8, 10 inches. South of 8 Mile we may only be getting 2 or 3 inches. I mean, it can be that big of a difference. And so that has to be part of that
Sure.
factors that are, that we consider.
Yeah.
And I think we consider our staff too. So like I remember the first one that I actually closed, I think it was February of 16, and it had to do with it wasn't that bad in Dearborn, but it blizzard like all around, and for whatever reason we didn't get hit. And I remember because I was driving around at 10 at night and on the roads, and most of the districts are going down, and then we had to make a decision. And this was prior to Dr. Ball taking the lead. This was under Mr. Burek. But this had to do with, we thought a lot of our staff in the local areas, we would have a staff shortage and a potential safety issue because of how it hit so many different areas. So that was a unique, so again, every situation is a little unique.
Right.
The other one is, maybe not a district emergency, but an individual building. And that's kind of why we have Maysam Alie-Bazzi here too. But Don, you would sometimes call me and say, look, we got an electrical outage at school A or Dearborn High or wherever it may be. And I remember one year we had it where it happened at several schools, including Lori and I think it was Lori Maples and maybe Oakman, or a few. There was a few schools, but we didn't find out, until like in the morning. It was like a 7 a.m. to 8.
Yeah.
So kids are already on the way. So what we had to do is we couldn't just say, we had to have staff there for safety. Then we closed down because it was very cold. It was a November day, and we were worried about their safety. The other aspect, though, is when we have partial closures, we have staff on hand. So, Maysam, could you talk a little bit about how we deal with staff? Not a full district, because when it's a full district closure, we know there's safety issues across the district, so it's shut. But we have other times where it's not, and one I remember specifically was March of 17, the electrical outages where we had buildings, some coming down and some not.
The windstorms,
and so we've kind of changed and transitioned some of our protocol with staff.
So we're in our almost third year now of actually having staff report during partial closures. And it's really been beneficial to the entire district, but most importantly for our students. Our non-instructional staff are needed to fill vacancies throughout the district. And then also with the teaching staff, our administrators have a professional development plan already in place in case of a partial closure. And so usually they'll come and they'll meet in the boardroom or in the scout team room, and they'll begin implementing the PLC practices. But what we've done for partial closures is that we look at our substitute list as early as 7 a.m. and we start monitoring to see if we have any vacancies, classrooms that have not been picked up by subs and then are being filled internally by other staff that are working that day. And so then we ask for volunteers from the staff that's the teaching instructional staff that's doing their professional development. And I'm really proud to say we've had a really positive feedback. And 9 times out of 10, we fill all the vacancies with staff volunteering, which is the first step in the process. Who's willing to go to this vacancy at building A or B, and then we do our best to align if it's a kindergarten teacher to go to an elementary school or high school. And so really the teachers have been highly supportive and the administrators as well. And then the buildings that received those teachers, they would have had a vacancy all day. And now they have a highly qualified teacher in the classroom with their students. And so it's really a win-win for everyone. So it's just one more example of how it's the silver lining of when a building closes. This is the advantage of having extra staff that day to fill classrooms that would have been otherwise left without a substitute. So it's been really positive. If we don't get volunteers from the building staff, instructional staff, then we just pick names randomly. I'm happy to say that's usually not the case. We usually do get volunteers. And then we send them out to wherever there's vacancies.
Well, and I've heard from staff that are very appreciative of that. When we come into crisis zone, we had the electrical storm or whatever that occurred where we had multiple buildings coming out. We support each other in the community, and we did warming centers, remember?
Yes, we did.
To help the community. But that's how I saw some comments. Some teachers said to me they felt a sense of community that, look, we're helping each other out regardless of the building. So we're going over, and they were so appreciative that they're helping their students in, building A to building B, whatever it may be, and that people are willing to do that and help out. And I think that shows too what we do during time, holidays and other times when we have families in need. So this is staff supporting each other. Another similar example, we win the substitute issue of the PASG going under. We all stepped up, including the parents. And this is when you're in crisis, you work together. And I know the team, Maysam, and there's more people involved. Dr. Ball, you guys do a great job because we just do what is necessary to ensure the safety of our students, and that's been my experience in Dearborn.
kind of talking a little bit more about this whole, like individual school outages or, a
Water main
break or something like that. Our practice is usually we try to keep the kids in the school for as long as we can, as long as the school is safe. And that way we know that the students are safe. Many times parents will call, they'll say, just release the students. Well, if there's 600 elementary school kids, we're not just going to send them home, not knowing if there's a parent there, if somebody is there. So our practice is try to keep the kids in the school for as long as possible. But obviously, if there are safety issues, then we would have to notify parents and have them come pick up their students.
And parents always have the option to come and pick up their children at any time that they feel they need to, other than when a building is in a lockdown.
Right. See, and that's where sometimes we get emails of people calling in. Why did you, shut down the district? Okay, when you shut down the district, you're impacting 21,000 students, tens of thousands of families and people that may have some indirect relation, and 2,800 employees. So if we feel that it's safe enough in the district as a whole, but if an individual parent, it's a good point, feels that because there's a local condition, even though we monitor it as much as we can, it's possible that there may be a specific situation near a specific school. Right. Well, they have the ability and they can make that individual choice, not to send their children. We encourage them to send them, but ultimately it is a parent's responsibility. But people have to understand that when I'm making that decision, it's not just, this is about a huge number, tens of thousands of people are impacted by that. So we don't take that decision lightly, but we will make it in the best interest of the students when safety is a priority.
As parents, we always think of our child as the end all, and as professional educators, we think of all the students, all the families in the district that are going to be impacted by the decisions we make. And it's never one size fits all. So we try to do whichever size is going to fit the most in the best way possible.
So there we have it. Plain and simple. If there's a snow prediction, just call Don, right?
Yeah, I was actually getting ready to mention that. So the students used to think it's me, but when we went to Dearborn High for the press club there, where they kind of came to I said, well, who really is giving me the recommendations as to the condition? And the students said, so what you're saying is we should, rather than sending to you on Twitter, we got to find Dr. Ball. I didn't say it. I don't know, you may have, but they came to that conclusion. So, Dr. Ball, where's your Twitter account? Because students are looking.
No Twitter account.
And I also, too, I don't know if we mentioned it, too, when we're making those decisions about snow days and things like that, two things. It's never made on a prediction or forecast. It's always made on the actual conditions. Yeah. So if at 6 p.m. they're predicting 12 inches by 6 a.m, we're not going to close the school. But if it's snowing and there's 6 inches on the ground already and they're predicting another 6, then we can make that call. We're never going to make the call on a prediction or a forecast. Right. It's always the actual conditions that exist.
Yeah. We had one of those 2 years ago where it was, I can't remember how many inches, but it was on a Sunday afternoon. You were calling me. I was coming back from my son's hockey tournament out of town.
It was 9 inches.
It was up already. 9 inches. And there was prediction for more. We made the decision, I think, at about 7 o'clock that night.
To close.
Right. Yeah. No brainer. And also, you kind of are in contact with those superintendents as well.
A lot of times I'm on the network the night before just to get a feel for what's going on and what conditions are around the metro area. And again, we have staff, so we need to keep in contact. And, a lot of times they'll say, okay, we're going to have a network. It's usually on text. At 4 o'clock, here will be an update as to what, and then districts start chiming in. We usually find out what Oakland County does, because a lot of times Oakland County gets worse conditions than us. But that does help us because there's we know we have staff members up there too. Sure. And so we weigh that condition, but we don't base it on that, but it is helpful to know of the local. Yeah, it is a factor that we look at.
All right. And there it is. That's simple.
All right. See, it's easy. And it's easy as I'm in the schools and the students have been talking to me and they really haven't been asking too much. A little bit. I'm getting a little bit. I'm like, I'm good right now. Boy, I'm smiling when they ask me that question. There's been nothing.
Thanks.
Yeah, right. Thank you both for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
Our pleasure.
All right.
My pleasure.
Until the next time?
Until the next one. I'm looking forward to the next show.
Oh.
And remember, we promoted it the last time. We have that 2-minute Tuesdays at 2:30 with the superintendent. So chime in on Instagram, superintendent.Maleyko.
Okay. And there you go. 2 minutes with Dr. Maleyko every Tuesday on Instagram. You never know where he's going to show up. You never know where he's going to be. You never know who's going to be on with him. It's going to be exciting. So thanks a lot for stopping by, taking a few minutes to talk to us and hear a little bit about what's going on in the Dearborn Public Schools. Big district, 21,000 students, 2,700 staff members, 32 schools, 30 some odd programs. It just gets bigger as we sit here and talk about it. And that's why there is always a lot happening in the Dearborn Public Schools.